Hello, welcome to the Sister Moses Speaks podcast, coming at you from Salt Lake City, Utah. So for today, let's talk about that accusing and bullshit phrase leveled against former and questioning members of the Mormon Church. You can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone. Those who use it often think it's their checkmate move, but in reality, it just underscores a failure to think and an excuse to treat human beings who want to walk this world another way with zero dignity. It's mean, hurtful, and it just won't go away. A holy sucker punch for the Lord, wielded by God's self-chosen elect. And in my view, it's fist-in-your-face theology and code for shut the fuck up. I sat down to film this episode, and then I realized I already recorded it 4 years ago. It's an audio version that I tucked away and almost forgot that I had. I was still struggling to find my voice back then, but I found it now. So here's the thing. Accusing someone that you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone, with the dismissive wave of the hand is bad faith communication. There can be no real discussion, no meeting of the minds, and no respectful disagreement. And I am over it. In this episode, I will explain the covert meaning embedded in this phrase and why it's not on you to answer the charge. So grab a cup, relax, and enjoy the show. So for today, we'll talk about that smug and self-satisfied assertion that I know many of you have heard, is that you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone. You see it all over the internet, all over Mormondom, and frankly, I'm sick of this shit, and I'm sick of people coming up to me and telling me, oh my, the light has gone out of your eyes, and oh, you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone. So my goal today is to show you just how stupid this little phrase is, and how illogical it is, and how hurtful it is. First and foremost, the thing to understand about this phrase, you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone, is it is meant to be a weapon of shame, directed at people who question the Mormon Church and those who have left. So my point is that it's probably true-believing Mormons. You know, it's kind of hard to define, but you kind of know it when you see it. To me, the hallmark is a rigid and inflexible mindset, a very us versus them, good versus evil mentality. It is to those people and to the leadership of the Mormon Church to whom my critique is directed. You know, the thing is that people who leave the Mormon Church, they're paying a dear price for their freedom. Not all, but a lot of them are. You know, your relationships may have crumbled. Maybe you were excommunicated. Maybe you got a divorce. Maybe you even lost a job. You may have been shunned and judged very harshly by people you thought were supposed to be your friends. The loss and sadness and the feelings of betrayal and life upheaval that you experience while leaving is compounded by even more abuse on your way out. You're met with contempt by someone who casually dismisses your life in the church with, well, you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone. They don't want to see your pain. They don't want to hear about it because it doesn't fit with their narrative. You were easier to deal with when you were a compliant prop in the Mormon salvation story. It's just easier to jump on a catchphrase bandwagon and gaslight a former member into oblivion. It also belies how cheaply the accuser holds their faith. Think about it, that they can project onto you how quickly the church can be discarded so easily and so readily. So I'm going to get really personal now, and I'm going to tell you why this particular phrase really, really grates my nerves, because I think I was really affected by it in a very personal way. I now refer to a general conference talk that was given in April 1989 by Bishop Glenn L. Pace. He was the second counselor in the presiding bishopric of the Worldwide Mormon Church. It was titled Follow the Prophet. So for those who don't know, General Conference is a worldwide meeting broadcast from Salt Lake City, Utah, which is Mormon headquarters, and it happens twice a year. Basically, the highest leaders of the Mormon Church get together and they offer their inspired counsel, and people, it's the gold standard. People are asked to view it as the word of the Lord uttered by his inspired servants. So way back when I first joined the church, people would get dressed up, they'd go to their local chapels, and you would watch General Conference being televised on the large screen. And, Bishop Pace, and I critique the content, not the man. He was the spokesperson that day. Again, I choose this talk as a very personal example because I was there. I listened to that talk as an impressionable teenager, having been baptized just a year earlier. And I fully trusted that I would receive the word of the Lord through these leaders. My adult self now wants to just take a moment, indulge me, and I want to apologize to teenage Heidi that I'm sorry that there was no adult shielding me from, the harmful effects of teachings like this. I couldn't do anything about it back then, but I sure can now. I can offer my rebuttal now, and especially since this teaching is alive and well. I want anybody investigating the church to have proper informed consent before joining. So in this conference address, Bishop Pace discusses how critics of the church fall into 3 categories. There's non-members, former members, and current members. And talking about former members, Bishop Pace shared this. Quote, "It seems that history continues to teach us. You can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone. The basic reason for this is simple. Once someone has received a witness of the Spirit and accepted it, he leaves neutral ground. One loses his testimony only by listening to the promptings of the evil one, and Satan's goal is not complete when a person leaves the church, but when he comes out in open rebellion against it. That is very clear. The only way to lose a testimony of the truthfulness of the Mormon church is by listening to Satan." So it made me think, so where did Bishop Pace get these ideas? And moreover, think he was justified in teaching this to the worldwide church membership? Now, I can't know because I didn't know him and I couldn't ask him, but just a little bit of research showed me that he probably had ample material to work with. And I'm guessing that it all started out with the golden boys of Mormonism, Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. Joseph Smith was the founder and first prophet of Mormonism. In the Teachings of the Presidents of the Church, chapter 27, titled Beware the Bitter Fruits of Apostasy, Joseph Smith responds to a member who insisted he wouldn't ever fight the church. Quote, "When you joined this church, you enlisted to serve God. When you did that, you left the neutral ground, and you never can get back onto it. Should you forsake the master you enlisted to serve, it will be by the instigation of the evil one, and you will follow his dictation and be his servant." Unquote. So does this sound familiar? So basically, to sum up here, when I joined the Mormon church, I irreversibly picked a side. And upon leaving the church, I was automatically recruited into Satan's army. I do not recall meeting my new dark master, nor having been given a tour of the 9 circles of hell. Brigham Young, in second prophet of the Mormon Church, in the Journal of Discourses, Volume 12, this was a talk given in Salt Lake City on June 30th, 1867. Quote, "If there is a despicable character on the face of the earth, it is an apostate from this church. He is a traitor who has deceived his best friends, betrayed his trust, and forfeited every principle of honor that God placed within him." Unquote. So wow, the takeaway is even more crystal clear here. Brigham Young clearly labels what an apostate is. Are you ready for this laundry list? Everybody grab paper and pen and write it down. For those of you who left the Mormon church, these are your daily affirmations now. Okay, you're despicable, traitor, deceiver, betrayer, and forfeiter of blessings. All right, let's go forward in time here. What about Apostle Boyd K. Packer? In his address to religious educators at a symposium on the Doctrine and Covenants in Church History, delivered at Brigham Young University on the 22nd of August, 1981. The talk was titled, "The Mantle is Far Greater Than the Intellect." Quote, "In the church, we are not neutral. We are one-sided. There is a war going on, and we are engaged in it. It is the war between good and evil, and we are belligerents defending the good." End quote. Packer goes on to assert later in the talk, quote, "Remember, when you see the bitter apostate, you do not see only an absence of light. You see the presence of darkness." End quote. Just let that sink in. Okay, so bitter apostates are bathing in the flickering light from the flames of hell, opposing members Do not be neutral. This is war. Okay, got it. These are just a few examples. And as you can see, any average member of the Mormon Church finds ample license to label former members as being servants of Satan, soldiers in Satan's army who are opposing faithful members. And of course, this shit isn't new. War imagery is all over the Bible and the Book of Mormon. So more permission there. Nowadays, you'll see what appears to be a more benevolent version of these teachings. The rhetoric is more covert, but in my view, just as harmful. They do refrain from calling former members Lucifer's little minions, and there is often emphatic encouragement to love the doubting soul and to validate their feelings, and it all sounds so nice and so loving. But if you look more closely, you will not see the reasons for the doubt legitimized in any way. Let me say that again. If you look more closely, you will not see the reasons for the doubt legitimized in any way. This is covert gaslighting. This is a deliberate attempt to erase someone's perspective and their experience. And it makes it very easy for those good-hearted, salt-of-the-earth Mormons to think that no harm is being done. So when you are accused of leaving the church and not being able to leave it alone, there are a lot of embedded assumptions in that. And that means that there's unspoken, pre-given truths about the situation. Then let's take a look here. The first and most important unspoken assumption to be found in all these examples is there is never a legitimate reason to leave the Mormon church. Again, that there is never a legitimate reason to leave the Mormon church. Now, to anybody listening, if a Mormon prophet has officially offered a legitimate reason to leave the church, then please let me know. I will stand corrected. But that means that this person's eternal soul is in no way in jeopardy of losing any heavenly or earthly blessings. According to Bishop Pace, there's only one very simple explanation for a person to lose their testimony, which is only by listening to the promptings of the evil one. So, in my view, that means that the leaving member now becomes one of Satan's flying monkeys, instead of an honest person trying to figure out what's right for them. Certainly not an honest person trying to live an authentic life. Think about it. You have a bad meal at an expensive restaurant, you'll tell your friends. An honest person who uncovers unsettling truths about an organization, they're going to tell their friends about that too. And since there are no legitimate reasons to leave the church, which incidentally is often found on checklists for cult involvement, then leaving is often attributed to a character defect in the departing member. You've been offended and you can't forgive. Why can't you just let it go? This implies that you have no reason to be upset. You're too emotional. You shouldn't be feeling what you're feeling. You are not someone who chose to leave a church, to walk this world a different way. You are now anti-Mormon, and hence an enemy to God. You are too lazy to follow the commandments. You love sin more than God. You're unable to follow God. You are worldly. You are too intellectual. You are too feminist. The moral failing is always yours. Your pain and confusion is rebranded as being a result of the influence of the devil, and that you are in the midst of darkness and you've drifted from the flock of God. Here's the kicker. As a citizen of the United States, and I can only speak from this perspective, you have a right to leave a church whenever the hell you want to, and you don't have to give a reason for it. You don't need to justify it to any authority. And you have a right to do it without being abused. So, decide for yourself. Does using war imagery that paints the person who leaves as an enemy that comes out in open rebellion encourage members to love those who leave, or to shun and fear them? I've got an answer for you. I was shunned and feared. This is the result. This is not rocket science. Pace also began by asserting that it seems that history continues to teach us about the vicious and vile attacks of former members. No, history has not told that to us. History is full of the examples of the abuses of controlling religions and the attacks suffered by their whistleblowers. During the Spanish Inquisition, for example, now famous philosopher Baruch de Spinoza was offered the equivalent of a 6-figure salary to shut the hell up and quit offering his unwanted commentary to the Jewish council. He refused, was shunned, excommunicated, and basically lived out his days in solitude to avoid a gruesome death. And also, you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone, is what's called the thought-terminating cliche. This term was coined by researcher and psychiatrist Robert J. Lifton. Lifton wrote a book titled Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. It's a harrowing account of American servicemen who were held captive during the Korean War and the mind control to which they were subject. I've read it. It's very sad and very alarming. It's basically a study in brainwashing. A thought-terminating cliche is meant to stop discussion and to prevent critical thinking, in my view. Lifton said that, quote, far-reaching and complex of human problems are compressed into brief, highly reductive, definitive-sounding phrases, easily memorized and easily expressed. In reality, reasons to leave a church are nuanced and complex, but here it's that simple. You'll find these kinds of phrases all over the political world as well. When someone is trying to invalidate your entire experience, it's handy to have a phrase to use like this. And here's the thing. When someone's a true believing member of the church and the church's map of reality is their reality, they'll never see this as abusive. They'd probably just attribute it to their own moral compass, which you don't realize has been deeply influenced by the institution. So given the assumptions, there is an internal logic here. And since there is no legitimate reason to leave the church, and anybody who leaves is influenced by Satan, then it follows that any good in life is a direct consequence of your faithfulness to Mormonism, and that anything bad that happens to you is a direct consequence of your leaving. Church leaders, in my view, are masters at letting their members fill in the gaps, and when called out, asserting they are the victims of vile attacks and pretending they have no fucking idea what you're talking about. This is usually followed by some patronizing version of, we do this out of love for you, and we invite you to return to full fellowship. And this is for your good, which is really just code for treating adults like children. It's extremely patronizing. And all this so-called persecution is simply further proof that Mormonism is the only true church upon the face of the earth. Probably worst of all is that this drives a wedge between well-meaning, faithful Mormons and those who leave. It undermines relationships and poisons the well of understanding between family members, between friends, and between employers and employees. It also provides current members an ill-concealed sneak preview of their fate if they dare to doubt. Watch out, your character will be assassinated too. And the church gets away with peddling teachings, calling human beings who leave evil, and all in the name of the gospel of love. The net effect is to make sure faithful members hold doubting people suspect in their motives and turns otherwise morally normal people into, for example, parents who would disown a child for the crime of leaving a church. Here's the thing. When a church exploits your goodwill and desire to be a decent human being, when it claims that you have to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z with unquestioning loyalty, doubting your doubts, or that you will be cut off from your family forever, and you have to visit with the bishop to receive these regular loyalty checkups to assess if you're worthy. Well, that's not a bishop's interview. That's emotional blackmail. This realization came during a time where I found myself ostracized from my former life, with no friends, no stable home, no money, and 3 young children. Trying to navigate a divorce and a faith crisis at the same time found me despairing, but also with rock-solid resolve that I would somehow figure this out and dig my way out of the brainwashed hole into which I had fallen. I had a lot of help along the way, and I hope that talking these things through today has given you a needed boost, or even a laugh, or just more resolve to do what's right for you. Nobody has the right to shame you or in any way abuse you for trying to live an authentic life or leaving a church. You are worthy of love, and you are worthy of belonging, and you are worthy of respect, simply by virtue of the fact that you exist. And that's a wrap for that episode that I recorded 4 years ago. I hope you've enjoyed it. The last thing I'd like to add is that it's just not Christ-like to exclude people, to dismiss their experience with nasty little catchphrases, and to assert that somehow you have the golden truth and yours is the way. I think of Matthew chapter 23. The setting is Jesus, the last week of Jesus' life, and he is preaching to the crowds around the temple and within earshot of the scribes and Pharisees. And I think I'm going to read verse 13, 24, 25, and 28, because it perfectly sums up what I'm thinking and feeling right now. But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For ye neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye them that are entering to go in. Ye blind guides, which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye make clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they are full of extortion and excess. Even so ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within ye are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. I think the best way to live a life is to strive to love each other, to be understanding, and I'm asking for better communication going forward. I sure do love all of you who listen to this. I appreciate you tuning in, and you won't have to wait as long for episode 4. I'm going to be getting that out pretty soon. So until next time, this is Sister Moses signing off for now.